Azerbaijan's request for provisional measures is lacking both in facts and law, but it is also highly problematic in two respects. Firstly, this request is based on a fundamentally incorrect reading of paragraph 53 of your second order of 7 December 2021. And, on the other hand, those measures requested by Azerbaijan are fraught with such defects that they cannot possibly be ordered. Following on the reflections of my colleague Professor Cole regarding the plausibility of the rights whose protection is requested, let me start by my first point. Azerbaijan has only managed to submit to you a new request for provisional measures by doing violence to the terms of the 2021 order in that case, by which you dismissed a similar request regarding landmines. Indeed, the new request is entirely based on a flawed reading of paragraph 53 of your second order of 7 December 2021. Now, this paragraph, just to recall it to you, is divided into 4 sentences. The first of these sentences you can see on screen. There, the court summarises Azerbaijan's line of argument, whereby I quote, Armenia's alleged conduct in relation to landmines is part of a long-standing campaign of ethnic cleansing, end of quotation. The second and third sentences then set out the legal position of the court on this question. Second sentence. The court recognises that the policy of driving persons of a certain national or ethnic origin from a particular area, as well as preventing their return thereto, can implicate rights under CERD, and that such a policy can be effected through a variety of military means. Right, the third sentence then. However, the court does not consider that CERD plausibly imposes any obligation on Armenia to take measures to enable Azerbaijan to undertake demining or to cease and desist from planting landmines. Now, you will note, distinguished members of the court, that these two sentences are wholly legal in content and they form a whole. They're linked between themselves by the however, cependant in French, used here as a conjunction, not as a temporal adverb. And this conjunction indicates that the third sentence adds clarification to the position of principle expressed in the second sentence. Now, though not authoritative, the English version of the order expresses exactly the same linkage using however, French cependant. Thus, the assertion contained in the third sentence is also a position of principle. The Convention does not plausibly impose any obligation on Armenia in terms of planting or clearing mines. The two phrases, the two sentences taken together mean that though, I quote again, a policy of driving persons of a certain national or ethnic origin from a particular area, as well as preventing their return thereto, can implicate rights under CERD, and that such a policy can be effected through a variety of means, end of citation, it nonetheless remains that the Convention does not, and I quote again, plausibly impose any obligation on Armenia to take measures to enable Azerbaijan to undertake demining or to cease and desist from planting landmines. The fourth sentence of paragraph 53 constitutes subsequently a factual finding to be added to the legal positions expressed by the court in the two preceding sentences. I'm quoting again. Azerbaijan has not placed before the court evidence indicating that Armenia's alleged conduct with respect to landmines has the purpose or effect of nullifying or impairing the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on an equal footing of rights of persons of Azerbaijani national ethnic origin. So, this finding is made for the sake of completeness by the court. Thus, the fourth sentence could have started, well, whatever the case, or in any case, or moreover, the factual finding of Azerbaijan's evidential deficiency changes not a whit the legal position set out very clearly by the second and third sentences. Taken together, the four sentences of paragraph 53 thus must be taken to mean that even were it established, which wasn't the case in 2021 and certainly isn't the case today any more so, that even if it were established that land mining operations were conducted with a view to drive persons of a certain national or ethnic origin from a particular area or to prevent their return, and that thereby the rights guaranteed by the cert could be implicated, one could not, however, infer from the Convention any form of obligation to definitively cease mining operations or to assist Azerbaijan in mine clearance. Madam President, distinguished members of the Court, Azerbaijan appears to have accepted the teaching of paragraph 53 of the Order of 2021, well, had done so until quite recently. Indeed, in its letter to Armenia dated 15 September 2022 and in a letter addressed to the court 1 week later on 22 September 2022, relying on exactly the same facts as those underpinning its new request for provisional measures, Azerbaijan has inferred some sort of purported breach of the obligation to not aggravate the dispute, which is an obligation prescribed by your second order of 7 December 2021. Now, Azerbaijan could have, as it is doing now, claimed that there were grounds to reconsider the third sentence of paragraph 53 of this order, given the purported new elements of evidence. But they didn't do it. Azerbaijan formulated its complaints solely in terms of the aggravation of the dispute, namely a breach of the extant order. And that is what Azerbaijan continues to argue in its memorial filed last week. Distinguished members of the Court, this configuration is not without similarities to the Qatar versus UAE case. Now, in that case, the Court first of all indicated provisional measures on Qatar's request. The UAE then attempted to obtain some provisional measures for themselves. Now, one of the measures that the UAE requested related to obstacles Qatar had allegedly placed in the way to the implementation by the Emirates of those provisional measures indicated earlier. The court dismissed this measure requested by the Emirates on the grounds that regarding compliance with provisional measures indicated earlier, the measure requested, I quote, does not concern plausible rights of the UAE under CERD, which require protection pending the final decision of the court in the case. End of quotation. Well, this precedent is clearly highly annoying for Azerbaijan. Indeed, if the alleged new operations of land mining by Armenia breach the obligation of non-aggravation created by the order of 7 December 2021, well, mutatis mutandis, the compliance with this obligation does not concern a plausible right under the CERD requiring protection pending the final decision of the court. But now, But now, in very timely fashion, Azerbaijan understands things in a very different fashion. Abandoning its earlier position was of course rendered necessary by Azerbaijan's desire to neutralize Armenia's request for provisional measures by introducing in reaction its own request. So it's no longer any question at all of aggravation of the dispute covered by the order of January 2021, since the obligation of non-aggravation is not a plausible right under the convention. Now it's a question of the alleged new facts justifying the revision of the dismissal Azerbaijan suffered back then. Under paragraph 32 of its new request on 3 January this year, Azerbaijan asserts that if your earlier order considered that convention didn't plausibly impose an obligation on Armenia to not lay landmines or to help with mine clearance, it's because the court considered that Azerbaijan had not acquitted itself of the incumbent burden of proof. So Azerbaijan is arguing that the third sentence of paragraph 53 is subordinate to the factual finding of the fourth sentence. Ms. Amarfar said the same thing this morning. According to her, I quote her,
found that the plausibility requirement had not been met at that time because of lack of evidence indicating that Armenia's alleged conduct impaired the equal enjoyment of the rights of Azerbaijanis on the basis of ethnic or national origin.
End of quotation. Well, with all due respect, that's not what the court decided in 2021. That's not correct. This new reading of paragraph 53 of your order of 2021 constitutes not only a pretty radical change and very timely change to what Azerbaijan maintained earlier, but it is above all wrong for those reasons that I have just set out. Let me add that the third sentence of this paragraph 53 categorically states that the convention does not plausibly impose any obligation on Armenia to take measures to enable Azerbaijan to undertake demining or to cease and desist from planting landmines. That's a quotation. The absence of any plausible obligation, any obligation. The absence of any plausible obligation under the convention to enable demining or to cease planting mines is thus not an issue of fact or evidence, but a legal consideration tied to the text of the convention, of course, but also to those characteristics proper to landmines, whose triggering is not a function of one of the factors prohibited by the said convention. However, this notwithstanding, Azerbaijan is asking you once again to order Armenia to hand over all information on mines that Armenia might have and not to lay any more in those areas where Armenia is anyway not present. According to Azerbaijan, it is sufficient to establish that its citizens could be potentially affected by mines on its territories that it now controls to transform the convention into an instrument for mine clearance. Not only are the factual assertions of Azerbaijan wholly incorrect, as Professor Murphy showed a little earlier, but the new legal claim of the applicant stems from an incorrect reading of the order where you quite rightly refused, for reasons not only factual but also legal, to uphold Azerbaijan's request. Though the convention contains no plausible obligation to demine or to mine, Azerbaijan asks you to make an order to such effect. Furthermore, and now I come to my second point, those measures requested by Azerbaijan are so flawed that they cannot be ordered. First of all, these measures are formulated in particularly problematic terms. In effect, Azerbaijan is asking you firstly to order that Armenia, I quote, shall immediately take all necessary steps to enable Azerbaijan to undertake the prompt, safe and effective demining of areas where they intend to settle Azerbaijanis. Now, what this obligation covers precisely is not really clear, even if in non-exhaustive fashion Azerbaijan indicates a bit later on, that essentially it concerns providing information about the location, quantity, type and characteristics of landmines, booby traps and any other explosive devices in these areas. That's a quotation. Madam President, distinguished members of the court, you've already heard it, but I see myself obliged to repeat it. Armenia has handed over all plans relative to the location of mines concerning territories where Armenia has been expelled from subsequent to the war in 2020. Armenia has no more. Anyhow, how could Armenia know, given that it's no longer in those areas? How could Armenia know where the booby traps might be hidden? Booby traps which could have been placed by civilians driven from their homes. Finally, in similar fashion to Azerbaijan's last request for provisional measures, where Azerbaijan asks you to allow it to require from Armenia the gathering of, you'll recall that, the gathering of criminal evidence, Azerbaijan stubbornly tries to obtain from the court a provisional measure enabling it to require this or that from Armenia as the mood takes it. You heard Professor Boisson de Chazouan this morning. Azerbaijan files provisional measures in order to, I quote, benefit from Armenia's cooperation. But what kind of cooperation are we talking about? And how will Azerbaijan benefit? Azerbaijan would like you to order Armenia, I quote, to take all necessary measures immediately to enable Azerbaijan to undertake demining. Now, what does that mean exactly? What that doubtless means in the mind of Azerbaijan is that it should be entitled to require anything it wants from Armenia as and when the desired behavior could putatively, according to Azerbaijan, be necessary for mine clearance. In other words, Azerbaijan is inviting you to order a provisional measure allegedly aimed at cooperation between the parties, but in reality would swiftly morph into a real legal minefield between them. Moreover, the first measure requested by Azerbaijan isn't provisional. In reality, it attempts to achieve prematurely what Azerbaijan seeks on the merits. One of the reparation claims of Azerbaijan in its memorial recently filed is that the court judges and declares, I quote, Armenia is under an obligation to allow, facilitate and not interfere with the return of Azerbaijani internally displaced persons to their homes in the formerly occupied territories. End of quotation. Well, you'll note that the first provisional measure requested also has as a purpose, I quote, to enable Azerbaijani IDPs to return to their homes. This measure seeks thus to anticipate the judgment on the merits. Similarly, in the section of its memorial devoted to the remedies that it seeks, Azerbaijan argues that Armenia is allegedly, I quote, interfering with the right of displaced Azerbaijanis to return to their homes in the liberated territories, including by failing to provide accurate information by planting new landmines. End of citation. In other words, the complaint of Azerbaijan on the merits case is also what justified and constitutes its first provisional measure. So, Azerbaijan is not seeking to protect plausible rights whilst awaiting your judgment on the merits, but rather to anticipate the result it hopes for in the self-same judgment. However, as is well established, the purpose of requesting provisional measures is not to obtain a judgment interim or final on the merits of the case, but to preserve the substance of the rights which it claims pedente lite. I will add, distinguished members of the court, which is more worrying, that according to the words of the agent of Azerbaijan, it concerns the
as an ethnic origin or national origin group and not in relation to nationality or citizenship.
As they, as such, are allegedly prevented by the mines and booby traps purportedly planted by or facilitated by Armenia. The measure requested seeks to favour, thus, only the return of people of Azerbaijani national ethnic origin, once again revealing the Baku government's discriminatory preferences. The second measure requested by Azerbaijan is no less problematic indeed. Azerbaijan is asking you to order Armenia, I quote, to immediately cease and desist from any further efforts to plant or to sponsor or support the planting of landmines and booby traps in these areas to which Azerbaijani civilians will return in Azerbaijan's territory, including but not limited to the use of the Lachin territory for this purpose. End of quotation. This measure is asking you to acknowledge that the areas to which Azerbaijani civilians will return in Azerbaijan's territory are those designated right now by Azerbaijan itself, whereas this question essentially falls to your judgment on the merits. This measure reflects once again the discriminatory policy of Azerbaijan, whereby only ethnic Azerbaijani civilians and not ethnic Armenian civilians are to live on what it considers its territory. Furthermore, what does that actually really mean? I quote in English.
Dire précisément in these areas to which Azerbaijani civilians will return in Azerbaijan's territory, including but not limited to the use of the Lachin corridor. My colleague,
Professor Murphy, recalled that, consistent with what it stated in 2021, Armenia is neither laying any mine outside its territory nor sponsoring such activity. The request thus seeks to prohibit an activity which doesn't exist. Anyhow, as Azerbaijan considers that the remaining part of Nagorno-Karabakh inhabited by Armenians is its own territory on which Armenians have no place, they're not welcome there. The second measure requested by Azerbaijan is, as you see, extremely problematic, because in reality it aims at obtaining right now a legal guarantee from the court to facilitate its ultimate political and military objective, which is wholly contrary to the convention, namely the conquest of what remains of Armenian Nagorno-Karabakh. Madam President, distinguished members of the court, the measures requested by Azerbaijan are deeply problematic, both in terms of their formulation and the substantive aim, and they're based on an understanding of the convention rejected by your order of 2021. For all the reasons put before you this afternoon, they should be dismissed. Madam President, pursuant to Practice Direction 11, you recalled at the commencement of these hearings, I won't respond to the lengthy arguments of our opponents, complete with pictures which were entirely relative to the merits of this case presented by our opponents. After having devoted a considerable part of this morning's hearings to the merits of the case, Azerbaijan thus usefully demonstrated that its file of alleged new evidence, as we saw from the surgical attack by Professor Murray, that dossier is as destitute today as it was in 2021, and that in reality, by devoting so much time to the merits of the case, what its request really seeks is to anticipate your judgment on the merits. Well, I'd like to thank the court for its kind attention. Can I ask you, Madam President, to call to the bar the agent of Armenia for the final submissions? Thank you.
I thank Professor Dajan, and I now invite the agent of Armenia, His Excellency Mr.